Do you believe an 11-year-old can change the world? Most people would say it's impossible. After all, children should play, study, and leave this serious matters to adults, right? Wrong. And the story you're about to hear today will turn that belief upside down. While you were preoccupied with achieving your dreams as an adult, a girl in Pakistan was rewriting the rules about courage, leadership, and social transformation. She proved that it's not age that determines our ability to make an impact, but the strength of our conviction. Imagine discovering that the secret to overcoming your greatest fears and limitations was always in the hands of a teenager who nearly lost her life defending the basic right to learn. This is the story of Malala Yousafzai, and by the end of this narrative, you'll understand why she became the youngest person in history to win the Nobel Peace Prize, and more importantly, how her journey can inspire the transformation you need in your own life. Have you ever stopped to think how a simple decision can change not only your life, but the history of the entire world? In 2009, in a small town in the Swat Valley of Pakistan, an 11-year-old girl made a decision that would echo across the four corners of the planet. Malala Yousafzai didn't know that by borrowing a computer and starting to write about her experiences, she was planting the seeds of a transformation that would inspire millions. It was as if she had found a small crack in the wall of silence and decided to transform it into a window to the world. In that moment, her courage made no noise. It was silent, yet profoundly powerful. The Taliban had closed girls' schools, but they couldn't close the mind of a child determined to tell her story. Writing under the pseudonym Gul Makai, Malala recounted for the BBC what it was like to live under a regime that considered female education a crime. She described how girls hid their books under their clothes, how they whispered about math and science as if they were forbidden secrets. It was surreal. At a time when children around the world complained about having to go to school, she was fighting for the basic right to learn. Her words carried a maturity that belied her age, as if adversity had accelerated not only her consciousness but also her life's mission. With each post, each story, something extraordinary happened. The world began to pay attention. This wasn't just another news story about conflicts in the Middle East. It was the authentic voice of a child who refused to be silenced. International journalists began to discover who this courageous girl was behind the words. Malala was about to discover that when you decide to tell your story with honesty and courage, the entire universe conspires to amplify your voice. What she didn't imagine was that this shift in perspective, from silent victim to active spokesperson, would be just the first step in a journey that would test not only her courage but also transform her pain into purpose. Sometimes, when you plant a seed of change, it grows much faster than you imagine possible. What began as an anonymous blog quickly became a voice that echoed across continents. Malala began giving television interviews, appearing in documentaries, speaking at public events, and each appearance was like adding fuel to an already smoldering fire. At 13, she was no longer afraid to show her face, to say her name, to publicly speak out against one of the most feared groups in the world. It was like watching a flower bloom in slow motion, but at a speed that defied all the laws of nature. The transformation was evident, from a girl who wrote in secret to a young woman who spoke openly to the world. International recognition arrived like an avalanche of opportunities and, of course, risks. In 2011, she was nominated for the International Children's Peace Prize. Just imagine, at 14, being in the running for one of the world's most prestigious awards dedicated to youth. She began receiving invitations to speak at universities, NGOs, and international conferences. It was surreal to see a teenager from the Swat Valley sharing the stage with diplomats and world leaders, speaking about education with the authority of someone who had experienced its absence firsthand. Her story was no longer just hers. It had become a symbol of resistance, an inspiration to millions of girls around the world who were also fighting for their basic rights. But here's a truth few people talk about becoming a public voice. The louder you speak, the more people listen, including those who would rather you remain silent. The threats began to intensify, the risks became more real, more palpable. Malala knew she was walking a fine line between courage and danger, but she had discovered something powerful about herself. Once you taste the flavor of making a difference, there's no turning back. She was about to learn that sometimes history demands a much higher price from us than we're willing to pay, but that our response to this test defines not only who we are, but who we become. There comes a time in everyone's life when the universe seems to test the depths of our resolve. And for Malala, that moment arrived on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning. It was October 9, 2012, and she was riding the bus home from school, chatting with her friends about tests and assignments, just like any 15-year-old would. What she didn't know was that Taliban gunmen had decided her voice had become too dangerous to carry any longer. When the bus stopped and two men climbed on asking, "Who is Malala?" the silence that fell was deafening. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of that moment, and history was about to take a turn no one could have predicted. The shot that struck her head was heard around the world, not literally but symbolically. Within hours, the news spread like wildfire. The girl who dared to dream of education, who had the courage to defy one of the world's most dangerous groups, was fighting for her life in a hospital. The irony is that the Taliban believed that by silencing Malala, they would silence the movement. But the exact opposite happened. It was as if they had tried to blow out one candle and inadvertently lit 1,000 others. Vigils were organized in dozens of countries, hashtags spread across social media, and world leaders issued statements. The transformation of a local story into a global one was happening before our eyes. As Malala struggled between life and death, something extraordinary was happening outside. Her name was becoming synonymous with resilience and hope. People realized this wasn't just about a Pakistani girl, it was about all the girls around the world who face obstacles to access education. It was about the courage to stand up for what we believe in, even when the price seems too high. Malala had become bigger than herself. Her story had transcended her own life. But the question lingered: would she survive to see the impact of her own change? The answer would come in the coming months, when the world would discover that sometimes it takes nearly losing everything to gain a strength we never knew existed within us. There are moments in life when adversity doesn't break us, but rebuilds us in ways we never knew possible. After months of intensive care in England, Malala not only survived, she emerged as an even more powerful force than before. It was as if the gunshot that should have silenced her voice had actually amplified it to frequencies that reached hearts on every continent. When she fully recovered and returned to the spotlight, there was something different in her eyes, a determination forged in the fires of near death and tempered by the certainty that her mission was greater than any fear. The girl who wrote anonymous blogs had become a world leader, and this happened not despite what she suffered, but because of how she chose to respond to that suffering. On July 12, 2013, her 16th birthday, Malala took the podium at the United Nations General Assembly, and the world stopped to listen. "They thought bullets would silence us, but they failed," she said with a serenity that belied her youth. From weakness, pain, and fear, strength, power, and courage were born. Her words echoed through the halls of history when she declared, "A book, a pen, a child, and a teacher can change the world." It was impossible to watch that speech without feeling chills. Here was a 16-year-old girl addressing world leaders with a moral authority that would take most of us decades to develop. The inspiration emanating from her came not from empty words, but from someone who had paid the price for courage and chosen to transform her scar into a star. What was most impressive about her transformation wasn't just her eloquence or her stage presence, but her ability to maintain simplicity and humility despite the worldwide attention. She remained that girl who simply wanted to study, who dreamed of a world where every child could have access to education. The difference was that now she had not only the dream, but the power and platform to make it a reality. Malala had discovered